God, I hope I got the aerial in video. That was awesome. Awesome. Or something. Hooked him right in the top of the lip. Look at that. Beautiful. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Braden with Bass Feed. So, by popular demand, I am making a fall-winter video. I know a lot of you are definitely asking me how I'm catching so many damn fish when it's so difficult during these colder months. So, I'm going to do my best to relay everything I've learned about cold weather fishing and see if I can't get you guys steered in the right direction. So, a lot of you follow me on my other social media, so you just see big fish getting caught over and over. And for those of you who don't follow me there, you can take my word for it, or you can check out my catches on FishBrain or wherever I post. The point is I obviously have something figured out. I'm catching quite a few big fish, and for those of you brave enough to stick it out during this crummy weather, crummy season, this is for you. So I'm going to start with the most important factor and why I have failed in past winters. It's where to find these bass and sort of how they behave. And I'll touch on largemouth as well, but I particularly focus on smallmouth during the coldest months. So, okay, let's pull up a map here. And okay, I just did an example here. So this is Lake Sammamish. Now, don't take my marks here literally. I'm just using this as an example. So I wouldn't run out to Lake Sammamish thinking this is exactly what's going on here. It is not. Okay, so let's talk about basically the summer-fall transition and how they're set up. Let's say late summer. Let's say this shaded area here is weeds, and the light area is basically the color difference is the weed line. So you'd have a couple schools of smallmouth maybe feeding along these weed lines. Okay, that's typical. So that's how it's laid out, and guys will find that these fish sort of just disappear. Now, I kind of have a grasp on why that is. Now, everyone just automatically assumes they slide out to the deep to winter. Now, that is true, but there's a little bit more to it. These fish will actually stay in the same depth range for the most part, but they will group up on certain pieces of cover or structure. For example, if you have, let's say, just a couple great pieces of cover in the desired depth range, these fish will vacate those areas and shoot right over to the best pieces of cover. And they will group up heavily on those pieces of cover. So they'll school up bigger groups. What happens is, once they do that, they vacate everywhere in between. So when you're fishing all these areas, you could be running along this weed line back here and never know that those fish are actually behind you, all grouped up on just a couple pieces of cover, but just very large schools. Now, those grouped up fish are exactly what you need to target in the winter. Now, I have the advantage of using my electronics, and it is, I'm not going to lie, very difficult to do without electronics. I throw in the towel most years about this time of year, late November, because it's so difficult. Now that I've really learned my electronics and I have forward-facing sonar, I've got to study how these fish behave, and now I can find these schooling fish. And basically, my success is I need to find a handful of those spots and hit them all in the same day. And then maybe I can string together, 3, 5, 7 bites. And that's a great day when it's like this. And they're usually big fish. So that's ultimately the reason for my success. Now that I have these waypoints, I actually don't need to use forward-facing sonar very much, and it's kind of tricky anyway. They're so tight to cover. But now that I have these waypoints, I can rake through these areas and pick them apart, throw different baits, figure out what they're eating. And I'll get on to baits next. I don't want to draw this out too much, but one more thing that they do. So this is a smaller area to use as an example. One of the other things that happens here is if you have a boulder field or something that's fairly large, it's not just one piece of cover. Every lake has a couple spots, any healthy lake like this, that bring in fish from all directions, and they migrate to these areas, and you will find them schooling throughout. Not necessarily big schools. There'll be groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, but they'll be cruising around in these areas, presumably looking for a bait fish or food and plumping up for the winter. So those are money areas too. And I think, like most lakes, I find there's a money stretch or 2 or 3, depending on the size of a lake, where they just seem to migrate towards. And those are money spots too. And so that's a bigger example. If you, instead of looking at a small area and fish moving into that cover, it's a big area and they'll migrate further. And which leaves, this leaves a lot of area. This is just an example. Vacated for the most part. So you could be fishing and fishing and fishing, and you're not even on them. And I'm sure that's one of my problems that I had in the past, but I no longer have that problem. I know to locate the fish before I start trying to fish big areas. So there's the where. Now, before I move on, I know I'm not trying to make this too long, but another fun thing to know is if you're targeting largemouth, oftentimes, let's say the smallmouth were in this spot here on these weed lines, right? And they, for example, migrate to their boulder field or their specific pieces of cover and school up heavy. What happens is the largemouth actually slide out basically to where the smallmouth stage in summer. So if you're just determined to figure out where the largemouth are, that is 100% what they do. They'll stick with deeper weed lines just like you would find smallies in the summer. Now, getting them to bite is a whole different thing. I find it to be much more difficult than smallmouth personally. I haven't found anything consistent other than big swim baits and things that with some drawing power. I will follow up with you as soon as I learn more, because that's still a tough thing. Early November, I have some tricks. I have, October, early November, I have some great tricks that work, but straight winter fishing largemouth, I have yet to figure that out. All right, so that's the where. I'm pretty sure I'm not missing anything. I think we're going to move on to baits. All right, guys, I just switched over to another mic. All right, so let's talk baits. So for me, I know everyone's got a different technique. And hey, whatever works for you. I'll just share what I've been using and take it or leave it. So the fall transition. This is kind of a fall-winter video, but it's all kind of important and ties together. The line starts to blend a little bit at the beginning of November. So for the most part, my trick to get these fish to bite leading into let's just start at late summer. Late summer, I do a lot of drop shotting, and it works great. I use small baits when I'm dealing with smallmouth. Something like flatworm or like a little goby imitation, and maybe I'll throw in some pictures in this video so you can see what I'm talking about. So smaller baits work great, and for smallmouth. Now largemouth, I tend to go a little bigger. So, if I use a 3-inch bait or a 4-inch bait for smallmouth, I might use a 6-inch bait or a 5-inch bait for a largemouth. There seems to be something to that, and it's obviously been pretty successful for me. There is a point to where I upsize across the board. Now, that doesn't happen until the transition really starts in. I'd say October. I start to upsize everything. Even smallmouth prefers a little bigger bait, whether it's a bigger worm or paddle tail of some sort. I just upsize in general, and that seems to it definitely tricks these bigger fish. And same with largemouth. I don't go much bigger. I'll do like a 7-inch, but as the water gets colder, that seems to be the way. And that goes not just for drop shot. I'll do it with my little Kitex, spunk shad, all my other little baits I use on my jig heads, even my jig trailers, when I'm dragging jigs. Everything across the board just goes a little bigger for a little while. And then something happens. This year it happened about the first week of November, but they are just not consistently biting something that's at least a slower retrieve. When they have a chance to study it, I notice the bite just falls off. So that is when I transition into moving baits. I do a lot of moving baits when that starts to happen, and it doesn't need to be fast moving, but you're trying to entice a reaction bite of some sort. So crankbait, blade bait, heavier jig head with a Kitech, spunk shad. I basically hang up the drop shot. I'll retie it and just have another option on there. You know what? It's just proven to not be as effective. I know that goes against a lot of advice you hear from other guys. I'm not the type to sit there with a drop shot and shake it forever until I get a bite. It's not worth standing in the cold fishing that way to me. That's why in past years I've hung it up. It wasn't until last February I figured out that moving baits work still very well in cold weather and these colder months. And it's frankly a lot more fun. I can cover water a little quicker. The idea is I find these concentration of fish, where they're schooled up nicely, and I'll cast at a school only a few times, and then I'm moving. And I'm fortunate enough to I've really gotten very good at locating these concentrations. And so any given day, I can go through 5, 6, 7, 8 different spots where they're highly concentrated. That is the key to my consistent success. Now, that's the biggest challenge for all of you, is getting on these fish that are concentrated. Now, that's a huge disadvantage for those who don't use electronics. It's certainly doable, but it takes a lot more patience and persistence.
Try not to be too loud.
Now, a lot of you, like I used to, would hang it up, just don't have the energy to do that through winter to narrow down where these fish are concentrated like that. It's doable, certainly doable. I know guys that don't use electronics that do fairly well, at least going into late November. It just gets tricky. Now, that is key. So back to baits. So yes, I upsize all the way into about now, and now, which is late November, I find that any given day I have to dial in the size, and that's annoying. It could be time of day as well. Sometimes I find 3.5 inches is all they'll really look at if they're being super finicky, and then all the way up to 5 inches. Largemouth, it's even bigger for sure, and it's kind of up and down. I don't have anything consistent to tell you guys on that. You just have to try different sizes any given day or time of day. I've had days where a size is working until early afternoon or late afternoon, and then I have to switch it up and figure it out again. So that is a bigger challenge as well, but certainly not impossible. And my catches testify. My catches testify to that. So that basically covers my baits. I will throughout this video post pictures of different baits. I'll go out there right now and take some pictures of my favorite baits and setups. And I hope this helps. And action is everything. So when you get these fish to bite, always pay attention to how high on the water column your bait is. You don't want it too close to them. You basically, in a perfect world, you would have it go fast enough over their head to where they can't see it, but slow enough to where they can catch up to it and bite it. And any given day, the amount of effort they put into that varies. So the retrieval speed will vary from day to day, and that's a tricky part too. But if it goes too slow, they can see it and study it, and I find that oftentimes they just won't bite it. Now, it's not to say they won't, and not to say that there's guys out there that do those presentations with success, but whatever they're using, I'd like to know what it is, because when fish get too close of a look at my baits, they're just not willing to bite it for the most part. I get a bite here and there that surprises me, but as far as consistency, it's got to be something that they can't study too closely, and they have to act quickly. It's either going to get away or they're going to bite it. And that's when I find you can get consistent bites. I mean, it's the definition of a reaction bite. So yeah, I think that covers that. I didn't want to make a huge video, but I did want to I wanted to touch on this because a lot of guys are like, how in the heck are you doing this? So this is the bulk of the information, and yeah, happy holidays to everyone, and I wish you the best this winter. I hope some of you guys grind it out and figure it out like I have, and it's a lot of fun. I think this time of year is a little more fun than summer. I'm getting more consistent big bites than I do in August, for instance. And it's this November's been fantastic. So I hope you guys get to that point and enjoy it as much as I do. And so I wish you guys the best, and I'll see you on the next one.